Welcome to the Standing in This Place podcast. I'm Rachel Carter and I'm the artist behind this project, supported by National Lottery project grants through Arts Council England. I'm going to be telling the historic tale of the intertwining of the lives of women working in the textile mills of the industrial Midlands and the enslaved women working the cotton fields in America. I'd like to welcome my guest this week to the podcast, Adrian Farmer, Heritage Coordinator for the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site. Welcome to the podcast, Adrian.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you.
It sounds an amazing job, Heritage Coordinator. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about what is it that you do for the Derwent Valley Mills?
Well, it's changed a lot over the years. I deal with the sort of heritage side of things, so that we've got a development coordinator and a heritage coordinator, and Suki, the development coordinator, sort of looks forward in terms of how we improve the site and develop it so that it's a better attraction for visitors and that it's sort of economically viable. Whereas I'm very much keeper of the heritage, so I have to deal with the planning side of it, trying to protect the buildings. It's quite difficult, really, in terms of we haven't got powers to do that. We have to cajole people to support and look after the buildings and try and ensure that planning authorities don't allow too much housing in what is an incredible landscape. You know, it's not just about the buildings. So that there's all that whole side of things, but also the research and the encouraging research, so we've got a better understanding of the World Heritage Site. So I'm trying to sell that story, if you like, so that people have a better understanding. But UNESCO have said that the Derwent Valley Mills is a great World Heritage Site because there's no other designation that would cover anything so complicated, and they say it's a complex site, and that's what makes it so great. And it is a complex site, so it proves to be a headache on a regular basis, but we love it for all that. It's incredible. It's an incredible thing to be involved in. Can be very rewarding, can be very frustrating, but overall it's amazing job. I feel very privileged that I'm able to be a part of it.
Oh, I just love that phrase, the keeper of the heritage. That's just amazing.
That scares me when I think about it.
So before we delve into today's topic, if somebody has not come across the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site, could you just tell us in brief, what is the Derwent Valley Mills?
Well, the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site, effectively, it's a 15-mile stretch of the River Derwent. It starts in the north. If you follow the Derwent down, it starts in the north at Cromford and Masson, so just on the outskirts of Matlock Bath, runs through down to through what Stamwell and Ambergate to Belper, Milford, Darley Abbey, and down to the Silt Mill at Derby, which is the point at the other end, and that all encompasses buildings which help to tell the story of the factory system. The factory system, as we understand it today, was effectively born within the Derwent Valley. There was obviously production of goods and materials before then, but in terms of factory processes, where there's a series of processes in which something is produced, in this case cotton and silk at the Silt Mill in Derby, this is it. This is the starting point, and so it's an incredible point in world history. It was certainly a big part of the Industrial Revolution and how Britain led that globally. So I always say it's like we're one of the most important World Heritage Sites in the world, because so much changed because of what happened here. The world works differently because of what happened in the Derwent Valley.
And that brings us beautifully then into our topic, because we're going to discover about three names: Strutt, Arkwright and Evans, and who were these people and what was that impact that they had? Obviously, that legacy that they've left behind within the Derwent Valley is visible for all. But let's go right back, because when we had a chat a few days ago, you gave me a bit of homework because I'd explained that I was going to be in Nottingham and in the area of the lace market. And you told me to go and find this building, which I did. It took some doing, but I found it. And when I actually stopped and looked again, I saw it so differently. And it's a building I have walked past so many times. But I believe you said that it was Arkwright's first building. So let's start with Arkwright. Tell us a little bit about who was Arkwright and what was he doing buying a building in Nottingham?
Right. Well, Richard Arkwright, I guess, is the best known name related to the site, and he was a barber originally. He used to work his way around the country, buying hair off poor women. Effectively, they would sell their hair to him so that he could then make wigs for rich women.
Gosh.
And that was a standard way of earning your living in those days, pretty much. But as he moved around, he saw what was out there in terms of what processes, what people needed, and he saw that cotton was an obvious thing to get into. There were developments being made in terms of how to produce cotton more quickly rather than spun like on an old spinning wheel.
Hmm.
It takes forever to spin cotton because the fibers are so shorter than wool. And gradually, he met a chap who had ideas, and he took those ideas and he developed them, and realized that he could produce a machine that would spin cotton and spin lots of bobbins of cotton at the same time. And initially, he was working in the looking at things in the northwest, but decided to move away from the northwest, and he came to Nottingham. And in 1768, he established some partners. They worked together, and they took a lease out on a mill
Hmm.
at Hockley, which is Bellwood Street. It's now the Mandarin restaurant. Effectively,
Hmm.
it's got a modern attachment to it, but the old mill's still there. And of course, that it was 250 years since the lease was signed on that in 2018. And I went to have a look on the day of the
Yeah.
lease being. I'm saying 2018. I'm thinking it probably 2019 now. With lockdown,
Yeah,
all the years start to move about, don't they?
I
Yeah,
do.
it was 2019, and the owner was so thrilled when he heard that we were there, because Richard Arkwright had signed the lease on the building 250 years that day, that he let us go and have a roam round in the old part of the mill. And we found also there were sort of inner walls with windows where clearly the building had been extended, but they'd kept the old outer wall.
Wow.
And various features and that dated back quite clearly to Arkwright's time. It was an amazing look round. I've been asked since by one or two sort of experts of, well, did you look at this? And I'm like, no, we were so excited. We didn't do it in any scientific way. We just
Yes.
explored. But the problem with that mill was that it wasn't water powered. It was effectively, you had a horse turning in a circle, which created 1 horsepower
Right.
to turn the machines. And the problem with that is that the gearing of the machines was so heavy that a horse would only last a few minutes before it was exhausted, and you had to get a new horse in. So there was clearly a problem there, and Arkwright, even before that mill was operating, Arkwright was looking elsewhere. So definitely that Nottingham was an important step forward.
Mm.
And when he was at Nottingham, he was needing more investors, and he approached Samuel Need, who was a financier, effectively.
Yeah.
But Samuel Need put him in touch with Jedediah Strutt, and Jedediah Strutt saw Jedediah Strutt already had mills that were they weren't producing cotton. What he was doing was it was hosiery, so that producing hosiery, and he needed cotton thread. He needed something, because silk was the main thing that you would use, or wool for hosiery in those days. Silk was so expensive, and can you imagine, woolly stockings would drive
Yes.
you mad.
Itchy.
So yeah, very, and so. It was Jedediah looking for a way of getting more cotton, which was easy to wash, was comfortable to wear, and wasn't too expensive. So Arkwright had got him involved, had made him interested in the project, and then they decided what they needed was water power to really generate huge, more power than a single horse. It wasn't a huge amount of power initially, but they found Cromford, at the site at Cromford, and developed that mill at Cromford, which from 1771. And that mill actually was up and running before the Nottingham one in the end, because it had less problems involved, because there was that power source.
Yeah.
And so you've got a series of processes for creating cotton, all on the same site, and that factory was working. So that was a huge step forward. And so that was Arkwright. That's his link to Nottingham, and of course that building's still there. Jedediah Strutt realised how successful that mill was going to be at Cromford, and so decided, while he was still investing in the Cromford one at that stage, he was looking elsewhere to have his own mills, and that's what he did. So
Right.
Jedediah Strutt built his own mills at Belper, and then at Milford, and created the complex grew. He had three sons, William, George, and Joseph. And gradually, at Belper, at one stage, the mill site at Belper was the biggest industrial complex under single ownership in the world.
Gosh.
Which, astonishing now. Some of it's gone, and it doesn't look very big. What's left, really, but it was, and so Jedediah Strutt. The Strutts are so important in terms of how they link through the whole World Heritage Site. That Arkwright would never have been able to afford to go and open that mill at Cromford. He'd have been struggling at Nottingham
Yeah.
if he had had Strutt's input. Strutt also tweaked the machinery so that it worked better, but also then, of course, things start to build up very quickly. You've got this big site at Belper, and then we come to the Evans family, and the Evans family were bankers. They saw the potential, as Jedediah Strutt had done, and thought, we'd like a bit of that.
Yeah.
So they certainly asked Arkwright to help them, and he was supportive in getting the mills at Darley Abbey started. But a big thing for the Evans family was that they became friends with the Strutts, and there was that sharing of knowledge with the Strutts, but that also that sharing of money that the Evans family had such access to, and it resulted in the Evans and the Strutts family, three weddings effectively. You've got one of the Evans girls, Barbara. Was that right? Yes, yeah, Barbara. She married William Strutt, who was the eldest son, but her brother married one of the Strutt girls. He died, and then she married another brother.
Gosh.
So the links were obviously very
Yeah.
strong with the family, and they saw the benefits of that. But the Evans family and the Strutts were very closely intertwined, and it's quite interesting that they all very successful, real powerhouses in terms of the cotton industry
Yeah.
at that stage. And said about William Strutt and Barbara Evans, their eldest son, Edward, he became the first Lord Belper. He was MP for Derby at one stage, and then he became a Nottinghamshire MP later on before he became the first Lord Belper. And he his seat was in Nottingham, and there's a window dedicated to him in St Mary's Church in the Lace Market. So that clearly he was not a part. Again, we come back to Nottingham. You've got that link again through Edward Strutt, who was the son of yes, one of the Strutts, but also one of the Evans family. There's that they really intertwine quite strongly.
I think that's the amazing thing about this story, that that people either say, oh, it's a Derbyshire story or it's a Nottinghamshire story, but the boundaries of these two cities have forever moved and shifted, but it's blended together. So when people say, well, this is clearly a Derby story, but actually no, it is also linked to Nottingham and that back and forth. And I think that's something I'm interested to delve more into. And that's clearly referenced in my own family ancestry, as they straddled across these borders and moved across and followed industry and moved to work in that very mill in Darley Abbey. So it's fascinating for me on a personal basis to find out about, all of these different links with my own family, but then to put them in the context of the Industrial Revolution and the World Heritage Site. But something else, that stands out from that description, with Richard Arkwright, starting off basically as a hairdresser, then started working with stockings. And that's another thing that Nottingham's history, is steeped in, is stockingers, people that worked on framework knitters that made stockings for a living. And that saying, note as poor as a stockinger, and those buildings you can still see around the city where framework knitters worked on the upper floors, because they added a lot more windows so that they could place the frames right next to the window. But it's interesting that you've got this character, this Richard Arkwright, and he's got those ideas, and then once he finds that right collaboration with Strutt and then with Evans and that financial backing, that things just move at such a rapid pace, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it all starts to pour out. This is really part of the reason we're a World Heritage Site, is because those ideas that developed in the Derwent Valley and became so successful so quickly. Arkwright, when he was he became Sir Richard Arkwright, and that wasn't really because of his impact on the economy. That was he was just in the right place at the right time to say something nice about the king, and the king rewarded that. But he effectively he was in a position where he could pay off the national debt. The national debt at that stage, as it always is, it was huge, and he had made so much money that if he'd wanted to, and he didn't, he could have paid off the national debt. He was a man of phenomenal wealth, and the family actually after him moved away from cotton production and into banking because they were so wealthy. And his son, when he died, he wasn't a sir, he was the richest commoner in Europe.
Gosh. Do you think do you think that Strutt and Evans and their connection with financial institutions and banking had a bit of an influence then on Richard and his family to move into that direction?
It could well have been the case. I hadn't really thought of that, but certainly, they would have seen how the Evans family were operating, and how if you've got money, you can make money. Is always the way, isn't it? And once they'd made that huge wealth, banking is a lot easier than cotton production. You've got to source the cotton, then you've got to produce the thread, and then you've got to sell the thread. Whereas with banking, it's a more straightforward way, and even the the Duchess of Devonshire was it was Georgiana, the
Mm.
probably the most famous Duchess of Devonshire. She had huge gambling debts, and it was Richard Arkwright Jr. that was meeting her clandestinely in Cromford, and providing her with loans that I don't think she ever paid off.
Wow.
But it was the, that was a simpler way of increasing that wealth. So yeah, that could well have been the case. It's
Yeah,
interesting, isn't it? They are very, very much intertwined, the three families.
very much. And, that's, just that the Duchess, you paint that picture of Georgina and, someone very opulent. She's wearing the finest of everything. And then to think that she's sneaking about asking
Yes.
asking for a bailout because she's got so many debts. But then when I look in, that makes me think of a story that I discovered when I was researching my stocking making ancestors. They were working on as framework knitters, very poorly paid, and it was Lord Byron, the poet, that was going to make his first address in Parliament on behalf of the plight of the framework knitters. That he saw that how much they were struggling, and I found this little entry in a really old book, and it mentions my ancestor was meeting Byron in secret on the Quarrybank Road to give him information about the wrongdoings that was, falling on the framework knitters, so that he
Mm.
could fill that report and create that, his first address to Parliament on behalf of the framework knitters. So you've got on one hand very poor people, creating stockings by hand in the home, and someone like Byron taking up that cause. Then on the other side, you've got someone who started in stockings and the Arkwrights, the Strutts, the Evans, making this huge wealth, and then bailing out, the Duchess of Devonshire. It's just,
Yes, it's incredible, isn't it? Really, that I'm sure there's a TV series in there,
yeah,
somewhere. This somebody thought.
yeah, there
Uh,
was it, and I think this is what fascinates me, that my first port of call is the art and the sculpture, but then the stories that feed into these sculptures and those little doors and avenues you go off, and these little tales to untangle and discover. I think that's what, I'm just so enthusiastic when I get to combine history and heritage, um,
mm,
with a sculpture, but and particularly place, and discover those sort of roots and that, those stories. And and this has been a fascinating discussion. And you've agreed to talk to us again later on in the podcast, and we're going to turn the table, and rather than talk about these wealthy individuals, we're going to actually look at the working classes that were entering the mills, where they lived, what their life was like. So that's a
mm.
story for another day. But if people want to actually see Richard Arkwright, I know that there's a fantastic painting that sits in Derby Museum. But is there any other images of Strutt, Arkwright, or Evans that people can see?
Yeah, absolutely. At Strutt's North Mill in Belper, sadly, will be closing in September because their funding has ended. But at the moment, there you can still see Jedediah and his son William, who'd married Barbara Evans, and that's an incredible museum to visit. And that's in the mill at Belper, near to the weir. It's a great spot to find out about the World Heritage Site and about the Strutt family and the cotton process. But at Cromford as well, at Cromford Mill, if you you can go into the very first mill at Cromford, which of course is effectively where all the processes for mass manufacturing were first developed. So that
Mm.
it's the birthplace of mass manufacturing, which is amazing in itself. But they've got a couple of films now to show people that they're not regular films. It's sort of a very, how clever these things are now.
Mm.
But Arkwright tells you his story first, and then there's the second one, which is Arkwright and Strutt discussing how their partnership worked and how they developed what they did and what they provided for the mill workers and for the world.
Yeah.
And touching as well on probably a story that hasn't been touched on so much before, and which we need to accept and embrace, which is the harder story of how that cotton came to be in
Yeah.
Britain, and of course the enslaved people that had to pick that cotton. So that it touches on that as well.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
those two presentations are fantastic, and if you get a chance to go to Cromford Mill and visit inside that original mill, although it's effectively it's just an empty building at this stage, they're hoping to redevelop it into a real amazing visitor centre once the funding's in place. But at the moment, being able to go in there and experience those presentations is an absolute must, and I would recommend them to anybody. So yeah, definitely Cromford Mill, and they have other portraits of Arkwright. So not just the most famous one that you can see in Derby, but there's another one as well, and there are opportunities to see those at Cromford.
Yeah. And you mentioned the stained glass window as well in Nottingham.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Edward Strutt, as I say, First Lord Belper, his seat was at Kingston on Soar, and he was well known for what he had done for the people of Nottingham as their MP. And when he died, a window was erected in his memory at St Mary's Church in Nottingham, and you can see his coat of arms on the left-hand side of the second tier of this very big window that was provided at the time of his death. So that it's well worth going into St Mary's Church in the
Mm.
Lace Market and having a look for that.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. This has been a fascinating talk, Adrian, and I can't wait to catch up with you again and delve into the lives of the people that worked in these mills owned by these individuals. And I think that's going to open up so many other conversations. So thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast.
You're very welcome.
Over the coming months, the project will be developing, and there's lots of ways that you can get in touch and find out more. Just head to my website and click on the project page, Standing in This Place.